Today I get to talk about one of my favorite things. May I say it? Adultery. It's a great story. How many does it take? 2. We're about to see the story. And how many do they bring in before Jesus? 1. Now that's interesting, folks. It was a patriarchal society. However, understand that the women were very important. In many ways, the women ran the family, and sometimes the husbands. But as a patriarchal society, everything was, even your lineage is through the mother, who your mother was. But you would have thought they would have brought 2 people to Jesus. They only brought 1. And nowhere can I find where the penalty is specified for men, where it is for the women. My word, there are a variety of penalties that are lined up. She was caught red-handed, so that means there were 2 witnesses, not her and not her partner, but 2 other people had to witness. That sounds more like a party, doesn't it? I mean, where'd all these people come from? Required 2 witnesses. The penalty, well, these people who bring this woman to Jesus, they want to stone her. There's a little hook there. The Romans had stopped the religious court, the religious authority, from having the power of death. So they did not have the power to stone her. But they come to Jesus and they ask what they should do. Oh, let's see if we can catch him. Because if he says, well, she might have been caught in adultery, but she did not sin, then he's going against the law of Moses. And they'd go after him for that. If he says, well, yes, she's guilty and she should be stoned, now whose side is he getting on? The wrong side of? The Romans. They thought they had him. Interesting little thing. Let's watch the story. So you've looked at the front of your bulletin. Yeah. Now you know where this came from. Don't do that again. Well, that's a strong way of saying, go and sin no more. Yeah. There's several ways of looking at this story. One is an outer way, and it's talking about actual adultery out in the world. A lot of people would discuss this story at that level. But that's not the metaphysics of it. Looking at it as a metaphysical story, every part, every character is part of us. How'd you like the guy that brought her to Jesus and asked him what should be done with her? Nice, friendly dude, don't you think? Don't we have inside this sense of ego that's judgmental? And sometimes that gets turned on ourselves when we have some sense that what I did was not the highest and the best, or not what I should have done. And we get self-condemnatory, right? The woman represents the feeling nature. The feeling nature. feeling nature that's attached to something outside, happened to have been another person, seeing that as the source of her joy, her happiness. So, what is this adultery? Attaching our sense of what brings joy and happiness and fulfillment in our lives to something outside. Could be a car. Could be a person. Could be a position of power. Could be a variety of things. All of these things are great. I mean, it's nice to have an automobile you like. My old Escape is my goodness, it's a 2005. And I love it. Right now, I love it at 25,000 miles or something. I love it. Still. It's still fun to drive. But I'm not one with it. It's not my reason for being. It's not a symbol of the real of me. It's something I use and enjoy using. We get all connected with feeling really part of something that and think it's going to make us happy, give us pleasure, give us joy. When that can only come about by the connection to the one source. Oneness with God, not with things. Use things, enjoy them, but don't make them the object of your existence. That's her error. Getting all emotionally bound up with something. And how long does it take for something to disappoint you? Or someone? Anybody here ever grief shop? You do know what grief shopping is, don't you? No? You feel sad, you're not happy, maybe depressed. Let's go shopping. Something will make me happy. Folks, I've done it. And I remember one time coming home and I had, I had a little gold bracelet and a new stereo system in my car. I mean, for my house, but it was in my car. I was bringing it home. I felt better. How long? About an hour. By the time I got home, I already regretted buying the stuff. And it certainly didn't make life any better. Mistaking the creature, the thing, for the creator, for the source of life, joy, peace, and happiness. I've said before, Jesus was an artist. I've never seen one of his paintings. I don't think any of us have. And I've never read one of his books because there aren't any. But here we have the story of Jesus writing in the sand. Jesus bent down, this is in verse 6, and wrote with his finger on the ground. And then again later, he in verse 8, and once more he bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. There's been speculation. I've read scholars who speculated that maybe he wrote the sins of the men who were standing there seeking to judge her. Well, that'd be a pretty cool thing. I mean, he could read people. He could read, if I may use the expression, the Akashic records. He could read one's history. Remember the woman at the well, and she speaks of her husband. This man is not being her husband, and he says, "You're right, he's not your husband, and you have had 5 husbands." He knew. He would have known what their errors were. Could have been that. He could have been doodling. First, an opportunity to catch a little time. Remember, they've got him. They think they've got him between them and the Romans. If he answers one way, he's violating their law, so that makes him a criminal. If he violates the Roman law and declares her guilty and should be stoned, he's violating the Roman law, so then he's upsetting the Romans. They think they've got him stuck. Well, the first thing to do when you're stuck is tap dance. Instead, he's writing in the sand, seeking to look within for a clear, concise response. What does it do? It gives those guys, the accusers, those portions of our minds and our memories that start saying to us all kinds of negative things, our accusers, when we've done something that our conscience tells us is not the highest and the best, and all these fingers pointing at us, it gives them time to calm down, to quiet down. He comes up with a response when he looks at her, or looks at them and says, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." Anybody want a stone? And all the jokes from all the years, no, Mary wasn't there, and she didn't go for the first rock, and he didn't say, "Mother, please." What he did then was toss the ball back to his detractors, put it back in their hands, and he did it without having to become defensive himself. And at the same time, that also shows some compassion. That divine spirit within us has compassion for our feelings. Not condemning, but throwing the ball right back to where it belongs, onto the ego stuff that's got us all stirred up, feeling badly about something we may have done, something we may have failed to do. It also gives then the detractors, those negative screaming thoughts, something to think about. Without sin, I guess we all have fallen short. Yeah. And they kind of realize that we have perfection in us, but we're not yet perfect. We're a work in progress. They could realize that they too make mistakes. And then ultimately, Jesus left them with no room to use his answer against himself. Everybody wins here. Everybody wins. So, great picture. I saw that picture and they have to use that. Go and sin no more. It's important that we look upon ourselves and realize that we're a work in progress. and not beat ourselves up having those screaming thoughts in the back of our minds saying, you should have done and you could have done, and why didn't you do this, and you should know better, and your mother taught you different. And it's a sin. You never have those kind of things fly around in your own head? Yeah. And it's not necessary. All you need to know is, I made a mistake. Great. The wise make mistakes, see that they made a mistake, and they learn from that mistake. The foolish make a mistake, and they experience negativity, and then they make the same mistake again, thinking this time it'll be different. I'll get a different result. Jesus simply says, when you've made an error, don't do it again. You don't have to repeat it. You don't have to repeat the pain and suffering. You don't have to get the consequences. Use it as a learning experience and forgive yourself and move on. It's much more pleasant to move on. Go and don't do that again. That's what he's saying when he says, go and sin no more. Don't make the same mistake. It's been painful. But you don't need the pain. You don't need the suffering. You don't need the condemnation. Let it go. Who's it more important? For whom is it more? Yeah. How do I want to put that? Is it more important for others to forgive us, or for us to forgive us? We're the only ones that keep holding us in bondage to our own negative thoughts about ourselves. You don't live with what somebody else thinks about you. It's not in your head all the time. Our thoughts about ourselves are in our heads all the time, bringing us down, making us feel like less than children of God. How important it is to learn and move on. I saw this picture of this little boy and thought, well, so who was it that asked me if that was me? Could have been. Could have been. Don't do that again. Have you never said that to yourself? Certainly your mother said it to you. Usually it was with that finger. Don't do that again. Many years ago, I read a story, and I've used it. You may have heard it so many times you don't care to hear it again. But I liked it. It was a little girl in Sunday school, and the Sunday school teacher stopped by her desk. Her name was Mary. It's always Mary. Mary, you're just a delight to have in Sunday school. You're so good. How did you become so good? She said, well, I just tell myself to behave. And then I make myself mind. Such a simple bit of wisdom. Haven't you told yourself to do something and then not make yourself mind? In the minding is the follow-through. Don't do that again. Don't repeat those errors. Do it differently. You've had the experience. Let go the grief and the shame and everything else, and now approach it differently. You don't have to have that same experience again. That's good news. You might put this up in a place where you can see it. That's a face I'll remember. And I'm long going to hear that. Don't do that again. Just as an aside, when Myrtle was still with me, my cat who lived to be 20, she had such an expressive face. She could look at me, and I knew I was in trouble. And she had a "don't do that again" face. Or, "I can't believe you put that down for me to eat." So it was kind of like that face. Yeah. But sometimes it's good to have a reminder. You don't have to do that. You don't have to just do habit. You don't have to do the one and only way that's never worked for you. Do something different. Just like the great wisdom I heard at a hockey game at Kemper one night when the Blades were playing. And at that night they weren't doing too well. And there was this guy down in front of me a couple of rows, standing up by the glass, screaming, "Do something! Even if it's wrong, do it differently. Rethink. Try a new way. Perhaps it'll be a better way." And know that Spirit within you, God's Spirit within you, says, "Neither do I condemn thee." It doesn't come from within inside, except our own minds, from our own egos. Let it go.